Hello, everyone. Today's guest does not just study startups, he studies where they come from, why some regions thrive, and how history shapes the innovation. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global startup ecosystem for over 12 years. Through our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today, and joining us is Professor Michael, full professor of entrepreneurship and regional development at University of Groningen. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for your time. We are so happy to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I look forward to this interview.
Great. So I have to ask this: is it true that you can tell whether a region will be entrepreneurial today by looking at what people were doing there 100 years ago?
Yeah, we have an idea that this is possible. So when we analyze, so me and my colleagues, when we analyze data about entrepreneurship 100 years ago, we found an astonishing correlation between the startup rates back then and the startup rates today. What really came as a surprise in the first place, but we also felt reassured because some of the theories that we allude to, that means the role of long-term cultural development or the role of other deeply embedded regional factors, historical factors that typically matter for regional development, apparently also matter for entrepreneurship.
Very fascinating. So, where did your journey into entrepreneurship research begin? Were you always the kind of person who fell in love with the old data and regional maps?
Yes, that's very true. Even when I was a kid, I really could stand in front of a map for hours. And when I then started later on my career, I was wondering about, on the one hand, I was interested in geography. On the other hand, I was interested in history, and I was also interested in entrepreneurship, and I was interested in economics. So what I did then was studying economics with a specialization later on in entrepreneurship, and integrating into my research geographical and historical aspects. So this is how I made a mix of my interest to start an academic career. And right from the start, I was interested in understanding why do some places have more entrepreneurs than others, and what are the driving forces behind that.
Interesting. And fast forward today, what are you working on right now that's got you most excited, maybe even obsessed?
Well, as I told you earlier, we work on this understanding of what have been regional differences in entrepreneurship in the long run. And now we try really to make a link of these long-term differences to economic development in terms of GDP, for example, but also into other more soft factors of regional development, like quality of life. And our idea, together with colleagues, we work on a topic how these differences in regional startup rates linked to employment growth, GDP growth, or wealth levels in general. So this is the most fascinating work. We try to do that for different countries. And at the moment, we start with the case of Germany because we have the best available data. We have some experience with the case. And it's also an interesting case because they have so many disruptions over the last 200 years, the different world wars, the separation of the country in two different countries. And still we observe that entrepreneurship from 100 years ago seems to have an effect also on development. So this is some preliminary insight we already have. And we try to develop that further and then also to expand this type of research to other countries.
Very interesting. Before we keep going, this is for our viewers. If you're enjoying this conversation, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn YouTube channel. We have got more episodes like this with top minds in entrepreneurship and innovation, and your support helps us keep them coming. All right, so back to it. Zooming into the present, for students who are trying to make sense of this fast-moving startup world? What trends or shifts should they really pay attention to?
Yeah, in terms of the startup activity, what we observe is that there is, despite the fact that there's a lot of things digital nowadays, that place still matters, that we still observe that there are some places that are more entrepreneurial than others. And it could be worthwhile for students to also engage or to locate in these entrepreneurial clusters or entrepreneurial ecosystems. At the same time, what we still observe is that the region still matters. So even so, being in a place is not sufficient. You need to be well integrated into social structures and networks to really benefit your venture. So this is the important role of social capital or regional social capital that really matters for success.
Very interesting. I have to ask about one of your more unexpected findings, that where departments are located on a campus actually affects the innovation.
Mhm.
Can you explain how proximity between business and science faculties can shape the entrepreneurial spark?
Yeah, one of the things that we learned in this process was when we did this research some years ago is, so we had the idea the likelihood of meeting each other might also lead to the likelihood of the emergence of entrepreneurial or novel ideas. And we saw that spatial proximity, that means in terms of walking distance between faculties, also affects somehow the likelihood that someone from the econ or business department meets with someone from the science and engineering department. And this may lead to some type of collaborations that then spawn into new ideas. What is also fascinating about that, you can speculate, well, maybe the university had in mind to co-locate both faculties, and that's no wonder that there is an effect. But what we use there is an econometric technique to sort out this type of effect, to really understand the causal effect of proximity. So what we used is the age of universities here. So we can determine the age of a university and the likelihood that there's some co-location of science and engineering with economics business is higher when it's a young university, because in a young university that was built later, you started to build everything around one campus. While when you had, especially within Europe, a medieval university started in the 13th or 14th century, you typically have the social sciences somewhere in the city center because there was hardly any space needed, while the engineering faculties are out in the suburbs or somewhere where you have a large green field. And so we can observe that there is still a causal effect from being close to each other when it comes to spawning entrepreneurial ideas. And that was somehow fascinating to determine this.
Very interesting. And speaking of ecosystems, right? Your research on leapfroggers, regions
Mhm.
that went from laggards to leaders, is really hopeful. What made that happen? And do you think the same leapfrogging is possible in, say, a remote Indian district or a small town in Africa?
Yeah, the story of leapfrogging is quite interesting because at the moment we do not know much about that. We can observe or we can trace in the data that certain regions really make a leapfrog. But it seems to be that so far we didn't find any systematic factor. On the one hand, you can say this is discouraging news, but on the other hand, you could also say this is encouraging because it also means that we can learn from very specific stories, and that there might be also a very specific story that helps a remote town in Africa or in a community to thrive by just understanding the local characteristics better. So I think the leapfrogging is one of the most exciting future areas of research. And so far, there's no systematic factors. It seems to be often a highly regionally unique story that is behind that.
Very interesting. But let's talk about the mindset. In many parts of the world, taking risk is kind of scary, and failing at the startup can feel like a social disaster. So, based on your research, how does a region or a culture shift that kind of thinking on failures?
Yeah, it could be on the one hand that you are exposed to different cultures. What we observe in own research is we really go back to 2000 years ago to the occupation of the Romans in the area which is nowadays Germany. And what we observe there is that people that were exposed to this Roman occupation are nowadays have a higher level of openness and a higher level of risk-taking as well. And our explanation is that this early exposure to people from a different culture increased these type of, or stimulated this type of mindset, and we can really trace that also to places that had Roman roads, for example. So having a road back then means that people could connect more easily, and places that were in close proximity to such roads even today show higher levels of openness. And our explanation is that this exposure to different cultures can lead to this increase in openness, for example, which is a very important trait for becoming an entrepreneur. So this, I think, can play an important role. Of course, it depends also a little bit on the context. What is the type of interaction you have with this different culture? What type of knowledge transfer takes place? This is all something that needs to be taken into account.
Interesting. And your research goes all the way back to 1895. So let's say you're the Indiana Jones of entrepreneurship. What's the weirdest or the most surprising artifact you have ever found in your historical startup dig-ups?
I must say that maybe there's not necessarily a specific anecdote, but if you go back to this really historical archival data, you get a completely different understanding about what self-employment or entrepreneurship has been in 1895, the type of industries that existed back then, the type of work activities people were doing, so how the routines within, let's say, the area of entrepreneurship looked like. And I think I find it fascinating that you see this enormous shift in activities, what entrepreneurs are doing compared to today, and still finding such a high level of persistence. So for me, the most interesting thing is there seems to be something very general entrepreneurial factor that survives despite these radical technological transformations and historical developments. So really understanding what is behind this historical data, because it's clearly not, someone starting with an AI or IT idea. It's something very different, but still you observe this persistence. This is fascinating.
Very interesting. And talking about academia itself, how do you see the role of universities evolving in the startup and innovation space? Are they ready for this moment or still catching up?
I think that most universities are nowadays aware of the third mission of trying to promote, on the one hand, entrepreneurship, but also to be connected to the region and to be a partner in promoting regional entrepreneurship and development. So I think that there is, of course, always room for improvement and catching up. But what I observe is that most universities are aware of that. At the same time, of course, the question is, we also need to distinguish between quality and quantity when it comes to entrepreneurship. So from my point of view, it shouldn't be the case that we push everyone into entrepreneurship, also the ones that might not be the people with the mindset. I think you can have training, you can have also education, but at the same time, I see my role also a little bit here as what I always make this analogy of the social science teacher in school. You should explain to students how the party system and the elections work, but you should not give a recommendation which party to vote for. So in a way, I try to level the playing fields, because we have also students sometimes that are not exposed by family background to entrepreneurship, but we have others who are well endowed in this respect. And the idea is to give everyone the right information to make a good decision. And surprisingly, of course, some students that never thought about becoming an entrepreneur might start a venture. And yeah, it might work the other way around. But I think that our mission is to inform everyone, to prepare everyone, and then leave the people with their best decision they can make.
Interesting. I think you answered my other question as well, but still I'll ask for those students or faculty or anybody who wants to start off or just stepping into this world of startups. What advice would you give them for navigating this chaotic and exciting landscape?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, there are some students who already come from an entrepreneurial family. I can say these students already know a lot, so I can, of course, help them with, let's say, providing them with some academic background of the things they already know, so that gives them also a little bit more confidence. But then we have the students where there is not this background, and I think here providing them with all the things that are necessary to set up a venture, the things that determine success, but also questions about what is the role of the local environment, because this is also my research expertise. I think this is the area where I help students most in explaining, is it really important to go to a very vibrant entrepreneurial community, or can my business also thrive in these regions where I'm well integrated, well connected, these type of things. And I think especially this environmental context of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial success is something where I try to teach students and where I also think students can learn a lot.
Interesting. And before we wrap, where can our viewers follow your work or dig into your latest research?
Yeah, my latest research, besides linking or continuing working on persistence, I look into in several areas, in several contexts. I look into the role of democracy for entrepreneurship. So how is liberal democracy linked to the level of entrepreneurship, but also what do entrepreneurs think about liberal democracy or other forms of government, because this is a highly interesting topic. When you follow the news, then you observe that there is some very controversial differences across countries, but also across entrepreneurs in their terms of thinking. And we want to understand, what is the link between democracy and entrepreneurship? And I think this is one of the topics that currently should be high on the agenda. And we also look into that in historical context. How has that been, for example, in the 1980s and 1990s in Eastern Europe, when there was a shift from communism to democracy? What was the role of entrepreneurs there, and so on and so forth. So there's plenty of things that can be analyzed, and I think this is highly relevant in these days.
Very interesting. That was such a rich and insightful ride from 1895 startup data to leapfrogging regions and small town innovation. Thank you very much, Professor Michael, for being part of this episode of School to Startup.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And to all of you watching, like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an episode. See you in the next one.